So today we're taking a shot at the second biggest tournament I've ever played. Um, the regular $215 buy-in tournament wasn't available today, so we're playing this $630 buy-in, 150K prize pool. So we bought in once a little bit earlier and quickly busted. We're rebuying in level 13 with 25 big blinds, and the first interesting pot is I was dealt king 5 suited under the gun, and it folds around to the big blind. Flop comes ace queen 3, 2 spades, so this is a very good flop for number one for our range, right? We're opening a lot of our high aces, obviously, even whatever king queen still, and it's also a good flop for our actual hand because we have a very nice flush draw along with backdoor straight draw. So we bet a little here, about a little under third pot. He calls. Turn comes a 10. Now we have, besides for our flush draw, we also have a gutter. We are going to bet again here. We bet. He folds, and we take down our first pot. On to level 14. We have king 9 suited in the small blind. Gets opened up. So in this scenario, we have multiple options. We could fold sometimes. I don't like to fold king 9 suited. Decent hand. We could 3-bet, but with a big stack behind us, we don't want to take that chance. And then we could call. So we know this player who's opening is a quite aggressive player, and he opens with a lot of trash. So we're going to call here. So flop comes king, queen, jack. So we've got top pair and a gutter, although our gutter is not particularly good because there's a decent chance there's an ace here. So we're going to check even with top pair. Initial razor bet's pretty big here. So now this is a tough spot because you don't call here if you're not ready to call another bet. And in this scenario, looking at what hands he has that beats us and what hands that we're ahead of. So obviously we're behind ace king, we're behind king queen. Those are hands that we'd be in trouble against. But on the other hand, he opens a lot of ace x. In that case, we're ahead. So we're ahead of other of his strong hands. We're ahead of ace queen, we're ahead of ace jack. We're drawing dead to ace 10. So that would be slightly problematic. But we make the call. Now the turn comes a complete blank. So at this point, I'm thinking either checking, in which case I expect him to probably jam, and I think I would call. So rather than that, I'd rather jam to potentially fold out some of his hands that have equity. If it's a hand with diamonds, or let's say ace queen. So I just jam. He calls, and he has ace 7 suited. So we're in decent shape. We just got to fade a. What do we have to fade here? We got to fade a diamond, a 10, or an ace. So we are about 2-1 ahead of him. And we fade it, and we take a nice pot to give us a solid stack. Moving on to level 15, we are dealt aces, and we are just hoping that somebody's going to raise us. Gets around to the big blind, and he shoves, which is a dream spot. Obviously, we're calling. What does he have? He's got ace 4. Beautiful. Just got a fade of 5. We do, and we take another solid pot. same level, we are dealt threes under the gun +1. We get open from under the gun. We're going to call here. We're deep, and we could go set mining. And we are 4 ways to the flop. Flop comes 8-10 king. Not a great flop for us. We are going to check and hope to see a free card. And we do get a free card, and it's the best card in the deck. We now have bottom set and pretty disguised. So the big blind opens here, and we get called by under the gun, and obviously we're going to put in a raise here. So we raise to about 3x, and we get called by both the initial 2 players. Now, we are almost surely ahead of anything. The only hands we will be losing to are 8s, 10s, kings, and I guess on the river 4s, but 4s would be gone already. Kings very unlikely. There's no raise. We're pretty confident we're ahead. Now, when they both checked us, we're going to try to get some value. We bet about a quarter pot, but we don't get any calls. Still a very nice pot to take down. And shout out to Stakes over there, because he is a great player. I actually checked him up. He's got hundreds of thousands of online earnings, and I see him at the top of the tournament board of basically every tournament I play. So shout out to you, Stakes. On to level 16, and we have 5s under the gun. We open this up. Now, small stack shoves, and the small blind also shoves. So right now, we have 12 big blinds for us to call, and there's almost 30 in the middle, so we're getting about 2.5 to 1. So we are going to make this call and hope that we're up against some ace king and ace queen hands. We see we're up against ace king and 6s, so we're going to have to get lucky and hit a 5. And that's exactly what we do. And we take down these 2 players and another nice pot. We're then dealt ace queen suited on the button, same level. So we get an open raise from a small stack, and this is a very, very easy 3-bet situation. So I 3-bet. He shoves. I'm going to call here, always for that size stack. And we see we are way ahead. We hold and take another small pot. A few hands later, we're dealt 4s under the gun. We're going to open this up. We get a call from a small stack, and then the big blind. So we're 3 ways to the flop, and we see a pretty beautiful flop, bottom set. So on this board, we should be way ahead of the small stack, obviously. Nothing he's calling with, except for if it's 5s or 6s, will be beating us. And the big blind can have some stuff here because his range is very wide. He has a lot of small cards. He can have 5-6 for a 2 pair. He could have a straight already, which would be a bit behind. He can have open-ended, whatever. So for that reason, when the big blind opens, we do not raise because, number one, we would like to get a call from the small stack, and number two, because he has a lot of hands that will have some equity against us. So the small stack shoves and the big blind shoves. Now here it's 40 more bigs to call, 60 in the middle, 1.5 to 1. So there is a chance he has a straight, but even if he has a straight, we have a lot of outs. So we're going to make a pretty easy call here. And we see we're up against an overpair, which we're fine against. So we just got to fade the two remaining kings. And then 6-7 for top pair and an open-ended. So we are in a pretty solid situation here. Turn comes a 7, which gives him 2 pair, but it's actually a great card for us because he now has no straight outs for a win, because if an 8 or 3 come, we would chop. So now we just got to fade a 6 or a 7, 4 cards remaining, and that king. So six cards we got to fade. And of course, we do not. He hits that runner full house, and we lose a pretty huge pot and our chip lead. But okay, we still have a top 5 stack, so just time to build it back up. On to level 20. We haven't really been dealt anything in a while, and we have Queen 10 suited in the cutoff, still about 60 bigs. So we call this open raise, and we get another caller through ace to flop. Flop comes 10-6-3. So we have top pair here. We are going to bet about third pot. We get called by the button. So in this scenario, we can be behind. What could we be behind? We could be behind, obviously, if he has some set. But other than that, he shouldn't have any overpair, because that would be 3-bet. He could have ace 10 once in a while and flat that, or king 10. King 10 really should be a fold here. Turn comes another 10, which is very nice, because now we are, the truth is, the only difference that second 10 does is now we're ahead of overpairs. But we bet about 40% pot. Calls again. Now the river comes a blank. In this scenario, I probably should have tried betting for a little more value, but I was thinking the only hands that really call a value bet here are hands that beat us, and a few worse 10s, I guess 10-9, Jack 10. So I just check, and he checks it back, and we see that he has 8s. I wonder whether he would have called the third barrel on the river or not, but I'm fine with checking it back there. On to level 24. We haven't gotten a hand in a while. So late registration's over here. We are on the money bubble, and we are down to 30 big blinds. We're going to open 8s on the button. Get called by the big blind. Flop comes 5-3-9. So there's two ways of looking at this. On the one hand, this is good because there are not many overcards to our pair, so we now have second pair on this board. On the other hand, this is a flop that favors the big blind's range. So we check it. Now the turn comes another 3, which makes it less likely that he has a 3. Makes it less likely that he has 5-3. And we are still ahead of 4-6 or any straight draws. And this brings in a flush draw. So we are going to bet a little bit. And he calls. Turn comes another jack. Comes a jack. Another overcard to our hand, as well as a third club. So when the big blind checks, we just check it back. And we see as a6. So we take this pot, which is nice because not a huge pot, but moves us up to 36 bigs, which is good. On to the next level, we have Queen 10 under the gun. We open this up, which is actually pretty loose. We probably should not be opening Queen 10 off under the gun with 30 bigs, but we do. It goes to the big blind who calls, so we're heads up to the flop. Now this is not a good flop. We have air on this board, no pairs, and no really draws. I mean, we have a runner straight draw, and this board also favors the big blind's range. So we check it, and turn comes a 4. Now when the big blind checks again, obviously this is not guaranteed, but generally if he had something here, he would not check back for a second time. So we take a small stab at it to try to see if we take down the pot. He calls. River comes a 6. So now spades get there. A bunch of straight draws actually get there. But we're going to see if we can take down this pot. So we bet about a third pot, which a little over a third. We could be doing this for value with, we could be doing this if we just hit a straight. We could be doing this with an overpair. Yeah, so we take this line even though we have absolutely nothing. And he calls and chose ace-3. So he made a nice call here with bottom pair. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. With fifth pair on the board. But he made the right call, and we're down to 23 bigs. On to level 28. We are now down to the final 20 players. We won a few small pots to chip up, and we're sitting around average. We're dealt ace-jack off. We open this up. We get called by the small blind, which is interesting. He's got a big stack, but with his stack depth, he should not be doing so much calling here. He should be doing a lot more raising, but okay. Flop comes Jack 5-9. Good flop for us. We got top. We really should not be losing too much right now. So we open this up. Now he raises. Now I'm going to make this call, but this is a little bit scary because which hands raise here? So the hands that I could think of that make sense that we'd be losing to right now is he can theoretically flat from the small blind with pocket fives, although I would think at this, with his stack, he would probably have raised that pre. Jack 9 suited would be a hand that he could flat there, which we're also behind. And then he could also flatten and raise with a lot of draws right here. I guess 10-8, 10-8 of hearts, 10-8 of spades, 8-7 of hearts, 8-7 of spades. So we're going to make this call, but then we're going to be a little careful here. Turn comes a queen of clubs. So now we no longer have top pair. 10-8 gets there. 10-king gets there, but I don't think you would take that line with king 10. So when he checks us, we check back. And we see the river. River comes a 7 of clubs. Now 7 of clubs. That also brings in the 6-8 straight, which I guess it's possible he could have had 6-8 of hearts. 6-8 of spades, I guess. So when he checks us, we just check it back. And we see that he had 8-9. So we take his pot down. 8-9. A little bit of an interesting raise there on the flop with second pair and no real straight draws or flush draws. But it's nice to take down a pretty decent pot with 20 players left. On to level 30. We are down to 16 players remaining. And we are a little bit below the average stack. We have jacks under the gun. We are going to open this up, obviously. We get a call. Now we see a shove. We don't really want to see this because 16 players left. Pay jumps are getting pretty large now with the next pay jump at 15. But we have a pretty nice hand with jacks, and we think that this guy with a bigger stack can just be squeezing since there's a call before. So we are going to call and hope that we are flipping. And we see the bad news. He's got kings. So this is not great. We have a 20% chance of winning. So this is for our tournament life. Now, for some run good, hit the like button. On the turn, we hit our set. River comes, not a king. We suck out, and we are still alive, and now have a pretty large stack. In fact, we are second with 16 players remaining. Let's go. On to level 32, and we amazingly still have 16 players left. Nobody's busted in a while. 9-8 in the big blind versus an early position raise. So we're going to call this hand. Flop comes 10-9-9. So this is actually a pretty good flop for us. We have the second pair, but the 2 10s make it less likely that he has a 10. I'd much rather see this than see a 9-10 queen or 9-10 deuce even. So when he bets small, we call pretty easily. Turn comes a 7. Now this is a great card for us because it gives us now open-ended straight draw, and it's also another card that is below our pair. So we are going to lead here for about a third pot, try to fold out some overcards. He calls. The river's a 5. Now this is a total blank, so we decide to again bet for about a third pot. And now this one gets interesting. Now he raises 10 bigs. Now in this scenario, I'm thinking, what hands raise here? So obviously a 10 would probably raise here, but there's only 2 10s left, and I think he would have raised on the turn of 10. So I rule out a 10. Now you have overpairs, but would an overpair really raise here? I don't think any overpair is raising here. They're just calling. So that's, now we're left with bluffs. So what bluffs does he have? Ace 8 suited, Jack Queen. Those are basically the main bluffs I can think of. And what are his value hands? So if he has pocket 9s, this line would make sense. Pocket 7s, pocket 5s. I don't think pocket 5s would have even made it this far. So I think there's more bluffs than there are value hands. So I decided to make a call. And we are shown ace 8 off. So interesting hand. He shouldn't have even opened ace 8 off. But he turned that same open-ended as we did. So I guess his line makes sense. Now we are up to level 33. We have only got 12 players remaining. We are the second largest stack. We have a nice hand, ace queen suited on the button. We open this one up. We get a shove from the big blind. Now this is a pretty easy call at this stage. So he's shoving with any pair. So almost any pair except for queens, kings, aces we're flipping with. He's also shoving with a lot of aces here. With his stack, he's shoving with basically all of his low aces. Yeah, and even some other worse hands. So we're going to call here. And we see a 7, so it's a flip. Flop comes 4 king 10. So we haven't hit yet, but it's not too bad. We can hit an ace, we can hit a queen, we can hit a jack, Turn comes a 9, no help for us. Also, it's a heart, which removes any of our heart outs. River comes a 3, so we lose the small pot, but we are still in a nice position. We are now down to the final table. Only 8 players remaining. And we are in a pretty good position with the second biggest stack, about the same as the third. Pay jumps here are very large, and any top any top five finish, I believe, would be our largest cash. If ace 7, small blind. So in this scenario, I know I have my biggest issues right now with these tournaments are I do not have my blind versus blind how to play down, so I need to work on that. In general, my final table strategy also needs some work. So we limp. He raised the 3 bigs. We're gonna call here with an ace. Flop comes 10-3-9. So it's not a great flop for us, but it also shouldn't be good for him. I mean, he raised from the big blind, which he shouldn't be doing with total trash. He should just be calling there and playing the hand. We check here. Now he bets small, quarter pot. So quarter pot on a hand that doesn't really favor him necessarily. We have an ace. We have some backdoor garbage. We're going to call. Turn comes a 7. Not exactly the card we wanted, but we now have a pair. So now we are ahead of a lot of random hands that he could have had, whether it be ace 3 or just ace jack, ace queen. So we check it though because he's a little bit aggressive and he's the big stack, and we do not want to be playing a massive pot with third pair. River comes an 8. Now, this might be the worst card in the deck for multiple reasons. First of all, this card completes any jack and any 6. Also, if he does not have any jack or any 6, he's the big stack and he's been decently aggressive. He can choose to just bluff with literally any 2 cards, and if he sizes up, I'm forced to fold. So I choose a block bet of 4 bigs to hopefully fold out all this trash that would have bluffed me. And he calls and shows 6-4 offsuit. So he raised us from the big blind pre-flop with 6-4 offsuit. Nice. Okay, we're down to 25 bigs in third place, a little bit ahead of the fourth stack, but we still have enough stack to work with. Still 8 players left. We have 5s, middle position. We open this up. Now the small blind goes all in. So in this scenario, we're at best flipping with a decent chance of being behind, but since it's only 5 more bigs to call, and there's 10 in the middle, we're getting 2-1, and we're trying to take out these small stacks. We call, and we see for the second time tonight that we are up against a better pair. But again, we flopped that set. Flopping sets tonight. That's how we've made it this far. Just gotta fade a queen. We do. And we increase our stack, move back into second place, and take out a player. 7 players left. Still 7 players remaining. We are in the big blind with queen 10. Small stack effectively puts himself all in. Now it is 4.5 big blinds to win 7.7. We have a decent hand, not a great hand, but it's only a small bet and a chance to take out another player. So we put them all in. He calls. We see we're up against a 4. 4s. We are flipping. We'll take it. Flop comes ace jack 7. So we didn't hit yet, but we just got additional outs. Any queen 10 or king will give this us. Turn comes a king, and he is now drawing dead. And we take out another player. Down to 6 players, and we are now have almost an equal stack to first place. Still 6 players remaining. We are dealt ace queen on the button. We open it up. Small stack shoves. We're going to make a pretty easy call with ace queen. Nobody else is taking anyone out, so we're going to have to do all the work here. And we see we are up against ace 3 suited. So we are in great shape. Just got to fade a 3 or some bunch of spades. Flop comes good. Turn, river. We take this pot and take another player out. Down to 5 players. And we are now the large stack at the table. Down to 3 players left. Somebody took out a player for me. About time. We have queen 3 in the big blind. Button opens it up. We're calling. Flop comes 9-5-5. Now, this flop favors our range over his, but we're still going to check it back with a pretty garbage hand, as well as playing against the other big stack of table. He bets small. We're going to call here with the intention of potentially bluffing this later if other low cards come out. Turn comes a 2. Now, I thought about leading here, but I just decided to check. Now, he checks it back. So, like I figured, I mean, the button's opening range here is actually pretty wide, seeing that there's 3 players and he's in position. So he could be opening a lot of hands, a lot more than even normally the button opens. And in general, the button opens a large percentage of hands. But with the check back here, we figure that he's weak, and we're going to take a stab on the river. River comes an 8. Now, this is a decent card. So we bet a bit over half pot. This should fold out a lot of hands. This should be folding out ace high hands that beat us, king high hands that beat us. So, yeah. Now, he shockingly makes the call and shows Jack 2. He called with bottom pair. Pretty surprising, but we lose this decently sized pot and are now back to second, a bit behind the chip leader. Still 3 players remaining. We have Queen Jack in the small blind, well ahead of the third stack and a bit behind chip leader. So we open this up. We get a call from the big blind. Flop comes King 9-5. So not the worst flop. We have a gutter to 10 as well as a backdoor flush draw. So when he bets about a third pot, make an easy call. Turn comes a 6 of diamonds, which is a very nice card here. We now have a pretty good flush draw to go along with our gutter. I check, which is a mistake, and he checks it back. That I should have bet there because I had the gutter, I had the backdoor flush draw, I have some potentially live pair cards. I should have bet there to put pressure on a pair of 5s or 6s, some low cards. The river comes a 4 of spades, so none of my draws hit, and I'm left with queen high. And I decided not to bet here because I don't think he's folding with basically any pair, as well as the fact that that 4 could have just given him a straight. So I check. He checks it back. Shows 7-6 for a pair of 6s. I wonder whether he would have folded a pair of sixes on the turn. I would assume not, because he also had a gutter, so it might have just saved me some chips, but who knows. Still 3 players remaining, and we are still in the middle stack. We get A7 on the button, so we open this up. We get a call from the small blind and the big blind. Flop comes Ace-6-5, so we've top pair. Pretty good here. I would expect a raise from better aces, but the issue is Ace-6 and Ace-5, 2 of the hands that we would be beating, and 2 of the hands that theoretically would just flat here, are now both ahead of us. So we bet small, and we get called by the small blind. Turn comes a jack. I don't think this card really changes anything. Ace-Jack's already ahead of us. Jack-Queen, Jack-King, still behind us. Jack-5, Jack-6 are not in his hand. Shouldn't really change anything. He checks, and we check it back, because after calling that flop bet, we're not confident we're ahead here. River comes a king, which the only thing that changes is it gives more hands that we are now behind. We are now behind King Jack. We're now behind Queen 10. So, not the best hand for us. Not the best card for us. So when he checks, we just check it back, and we see he has Ace-8. So, slightly better hand than us, and he takes the pot, and now he's a 2-1 chip lead on us. So 3 remaining still. We are now a bit about double the small stack, but way behind the big stack. We are dealt 5s in the big blind with an open, and we are going to raise this up with a pair. But before we get the chance, the small stack shoves. Now, I could fold here, and in fact, if I thought the big stack would call here, I would fold, because I'm not going to risk my chips if the big stack can just take him out and still give me that pay jump. But the big stack had been opening and folding to basically every raise. So I decided to put it all in here. Big stack folds, and we see we are up against Ace-Queen for a flip. Just gotta hold. Just gotta hold and move to second. Flop comes quite nice. We are still ahead. Just gotta fade an ace or a queen. Let's go. Turn to 3. Beautiful. Just gotta fade an ace or queen. 6 cards. And let's go. No ace, no queen. We take this pot down to 2 players. Big pay jump. And we now have 40 bigs. So we are close enough to battle with the big stack. Let's get this W. So now we are heads up. And we have a smaller stack, but we still have a decent stack. Heads up is not something I really have much experience with. We were dealt 2s in the small blind, which is also the button. Now, I considered shoving this, but the problem is if he calls, no matter what he has, at best, we're flipping. Decent chance we're drawing very thin. So I just opened this up, hoping to take it down pre-flop. He calls. Flop comes 10-9-4. Not the worst flop in the world, because a lot of his hands with just 2 high cards don't have anything yet. So when he checks us, we're going to take a stab at it, try to take us down, bet half pot. He calls. Now turn comes another 9. Now this is actually a pretty good card, because it removes a few possible hands that are, meaning, yeah, I don't know what I just said, but it lowers the combos of 9s he can have. And even 1-9 was ahead of us. So this is not a bad card for us. So even though he opens, which is pretty strong here, we still make the call, because he can try to represent the 9 and be bluffing with a lot of hands. If he has Jack Queen here, if he has Jack King even, 8 Jack, all those hands are open-ended, and can try to represent the 9 with their backdoor equity. So we still call. River comes a queen. Now, this is no help to us, obviously, and it's a pretty bad card because literally everything gets there, right? His queen jack, he now has top pair. If he had king jack, he now has a straight. If he had ace queen, he has top pair. King queen's got top pair. 8 jack has a straight. Literally, I cannot think of anything really that we're beating, so we are going to have to fold this. And we are now down to a much smaller stack, and he has a almost 2.5 to 1 chip lead. Okay, so after treading water for a bunch of hands, we are dealt queens in the small blind. Beautiful hand. Now, theoretically, I could shove this and hope he calls, but there's a decent chance he just folds and we get no value. So we just open this up, and he calls. We see 9-2-2. Now, this is a pretty solid flop because obviously our queens is still a top pair. Also, right, with 2-2s out there, it's less likely that he has a 2, which also makes it less likely, which makes it where there's no 2 pairs on this board, as well as the fact that if he now hits a 2 pair later, it doesn't matter because we'll have queens and 2s. So, when he checks to us, we bet about half pot, and he calls. Okay. We're good with that. Turn comes a 4. Now, this brings in a backdoor flush draw, as well as some backdoor straight draws. But another very good card for us, right? We're only losing to 4s and 9s, which are 3-betting this pre-flop 100% of the time with the chip lead, and a 2, which is possible. So when he checks us, we size up, and we bet about 70% pot, and he calls here. Now, I'm a bit surprised that he called. So I'm putting him on either a 9, or I guess a straight or flush draw, because unless he has a 2, which we'd be in trouble. Now, the river comes probably the best card in the deck, right? The third 2. So now that there's now only 1 2 that he could have possibly been holding. So at this point, we are losing to 1 2, right? Pocket 4s, pocket 9s. I think there's exactly 0% chance he has pocket 9s. I think there is a very small chance he's pocket 4s. Very small. I think he's 3-betting that with probably 80% of the time. And a few combos of that 1 2 that he has. But not so many, because I think a lot of 2s he actually is folding pre-flop. So we have a few options here. We can bet small and just hope to induce a bluff. Or we could hope that he has a 9 and we'll call. So we size up, and we size all the way up to all in. Now, here it looks like he insta calls because that's the way the setting is. But in real life, he tanks for about 2 minutes. And the second he starts tanking, we know that we're good here. So we're happy when he makes the call, and he shows 9-7 for what on the board looks like top full house. And we double up and now have a nice chip lead and are getting closer to taking our first W. So now we have about a 3.5 to 1 chip lead, and we are dealt 9s in the small blind. So I debated jamming here, but I was thinking if I jam here, I'm basically only getting called by hands that are flipping, and I would rather wait for a better spot, potentially. So I do not jam. He calls. Flop comes Jack, 6-7. This is a very good flop for us. We have still second pair with some backdoor draws, and the only one overcard. So he could be behind with Queen King. He could be behind with Queen 10, whatever. A lot of cards behind us. So when he checks, we size up and we bet about 70% pot. He calls. Now, this is not great for him to call, but I think if he had a strong jack, he's jamming here. Or if he has 6-7, he's for sure jamming here. So we're not too concerned. Turn comes a 5, brings in the spade draw. Also brings in some 2-pair combos, but it also gives us a gutter to a straight. So it's not the worst card. When he checks to us, we bet half pot. Now he calls again. Now we are even slightly more nervous. What hand is calling again with that we're beating, right? Meaning 6-7, I don't think he would have jammed that. He doesn't have 6-7. 7-5 is now beating us. Any jack is still beating us. 3-4 got there. 4-8 got there. So we're not so happy about that call. Now the river comes another 10. Now this just brings another over card to our hand. And with him calling flop and turn, I cannot come up with any real hands that we're going to get value from here, right? If we bet here, if he has a better hand than us, he's probably calling. If he has some random worse hands, he's folding. So we just check it back. And we see he has 8-6, literally the best hand we could have possibly asked for. Flopped a pair. He turned an open-ended, but we still beat him, and we now have an enormous lead, 7-1 chip lead, and it's just a matter of time. A few hands later, we have ace-jack on the big blind, and we are just hoping to get this all in here. And what do you know? He open shoves. Now this is beautiful because he's open shoving with a ton of garbage. We are going to snap call this, and we see what he open shoved with, which is absolute garbage, 9-6 suited. We are way ahead. Just got to hold here. Flop comes Queen 7-4. He hasn't hit his pair, but that is a pretty disgusting flop for us. He now has the flush draw, so he has 9 outs to the nuts, as well as still having hitting a 9 or a 6 and some backdoor straight draws. Turn comes an 8, so now he has even more outs, right? He can hit any heart, gives him the win, wins his hand. A 10 gives him this hand. A 5 gives him this hand. A 9 gives him the hand. A 6 gives him this hand. He's got a ton of outs. We just got to fade all those outs. Let's pray for a black high card on the river. River comes. 3 of clubs. We win. We win. Let's go. Our first real tournament win ever. And our biggest cash by a mile. Wow. That was a grind. That win is just absolutely crazy to me. I mean, way more money than I've ever won in my entire life. And that itself was a third of my goal. So now we are up to 48% of the way towards our 100K goal for this year. Subscribe and watch to see the rest of this journey because we're going to go hit that 100K. And we are going to do some giveaways along the ride. Maybe some cash, or maybe it'll be fun. I'll start live streaming and I'll play a tournament and I will give half the winnings to one of the subscribers. So follow along and share with your friends.